start by just sauteing up some onions and some garlic. I'm gonna put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the pan. And I have it, you know, at medium heat or so. I was trying to get this sort of started ahead of time. And then I've already pre-chopped the onion and the garlic. It calls for 4 cloves of garlic and 1 large onion. I had so many shallots, so instead of onions, I used 2 big shallots, which is a great alternative. You know, you can certainly swap out. And again, I used probably about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, and that's your preference. If you like a lot of garlic, you know, add 4 for sure. If you're not so crazy about it, then maybe you might even want to cut back to 2. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just throw that in the pan. And as I mentioned before, when you're chopping and you're transferring from your cutting board to your pots to cook, if you just invest in one of these little bench scrapers, they're great for baking, they're great for cleaning up your counters when you're rolling out your Christmas cookies and you have all that flour and dough stuck to your counters. And they're fantastic for getting things off your cutting board, so you're not using the blade of your knife, which will eventually just dull the knife. All right, so we have that in, and now we're going to just keep adding more ingredients. So let me just stir this around. I do not want to burn that garlic, so we're going to keep an eye on that. Now we're going to add a full tin of anchovies, and I've worked with these before. You're not going to taste the anchovy flavor. They're just adding a really good depth and umami kind of flavor to this, which you really need, because when it comes to sort of Tuscan style cooking, the idea is it's pretty simple, not a whole lot of ingredients, but the ingredients that are being used are, you know, really good, right? Are really flavorful. So you really need these anchovies in here to really give it some flavor. And they're just going to cook down. They're going to just disappear into the sauce. Now, because I have this a little higher because I'm trying to kind of speed this along, I'm just for now. I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of some stock just so that my garlic doesn't burn. So if you're finding that when you're cooking and you have your heats up a little too high, and I want it to be because I want to make sure we can get through this, you can always cool down your pan a little bit with a little bit of liquid if you're finding that something's burning, or, you know, obviously you can adjust the heat too, but sometimes you might just want that heat to be higher. All right, so I'm going to let that go. So we're going to do, we have our onions, our garlic, our anchovies, and we're going to do a sprinkle of red pepper for just a little bit of heat. It's about 1/4 teaspoon. You can go obviously more or less depending, or skip it all together, just depending on your flavor preference. And then I think that's it. So we just start out with a little saute with the garlic, the onions, the anchovies, and the red pepper. We're just going to let this simmer a little bit. Now, I know we're always trying to cook with 5-ish ingredients, and we want to cook fast and we want to cook light, and I try really hard to stay to that. Some recipes just need a little bit more, and it's nothing that, you know, really I think adds any difficulty to making these dishes, because most of the time you probably have these ingredients in your pantry anyway. One thing that I'm going to add, just because I love it, and you don't have to, it's not in the recipe, I am going to add some fennel seeds to this. I just love fennel in any kind of Italian like sauces or stews, and probably maybe 1/2 teaspoon of the fennel. You do not need to add it. I am adding the fennel seeds just because I do really love it. All right, so this is pretty well together. Let me see, I can bring it over and show you. So it's just, these are all sauteed. The anchovies haven't quite broken down yet, but they will as you cook through the sauce. Now the anchovies that I use, these are you know, wild anchovies that I found in the Euro market that I go to. These are a little thicker than the ones you would find in the little tins in the supermarket. They're pretty flat, and they really just dissolve and break down. That's probably more likely what type of anchovies you're going to use, but you do want to use that full tin. All right, now that we have that going, I'm going to add this stock, and let me just talk about this for a second. Because in the recipe it says to use shrimp that have the shells on them, the uncooked shrimp. And then when you peel the shells, you can create your own like seafood shrimp stock from the shells. It's a great way to add flavor to this dish. I sent my husband to Costco to pick up shrimp, and I forgot to specify that I needed shrimp with shells on it. So I got the shrimp that we got just didn't have the shells on it. And let me just show them real quick while we're talking about it. But and also, you know, the size of the shrimp. So that it specifies on the recipe that you want the shrimps to be 26 to 30, which means it's 26 to 30 shrimp in a pound. And these were a little bit larger. So this was a 2-pound bag, and these were 21 to 25, which means that they're larger. So there's fewer of them in the pound, which is fine. They're just going to be a little bit bigger in the stew. But the smaller shrimp, the one that 26 to 30, which is pretty much the more common shrimp you're going to see out there, particularly in supermarkets, that's the size you want. So you want them just to be a little bit smaller. So I didn't have the shells, so I did not go ahead and make the seafood stock, but the recipe shows you how to do that. It's super simple. It's a great way to use those shells of the shrimp. I just went ahead and bought some seafood stock at the supermarket when I was there. If you don't have seafood stock, you could use clam juice. That would be a great substitute. If you have neither one of these and you just don't want to deal with the shrimp, the shells, and creating your own stock, just go ahead and use a vegetable broth or even a chicken broth. It's still going to be delicious. So there's a lot of options, but what I did add was I did add a full cup of this seafood stock, all right, since I didn't make it ahead of time. And now we're going to add one small, like 14-ounce can of either, you know, minced or these are crushed tomatoes. I think the recipe says diced. Either's fine. All right, so we're going to add that in. And then, I just want to check my recipe because pretty much you're just kind of adding everything together. So we're just going to add and then we're going to add the beans as well. So your bean option is really based on what you have in your pantry. So don't go out and buy beans if you already have beans in your pantry. The recipe calls for cannellini beans. I think it is really best with a white type of bean, but really any bean could really work in here. I did not have cannellini beans. I have butter beans, and I also had Great Northern, and I had navy beans. So I was like, I am not going out to buy cannellini beans. I'll use what I have. And I just happen to love these really large, big butter beans. So that's what I'm using. So you're going to do 2 cans. One can's been drained, and the other can was not drained. So you kind of want the liquid from the can, from the one can, and then the other can you can go ahead and drain and rinse. But you know, and they still have a little bit of thickness at the bottom of the can, which is fine because that'll help to thicken the stew. So those are the beans. So I just use the butter beans. The recipe calls for cannellini, but again, you know, we're cooking from our pantry, and especially right now, we don't need to be running back out to the store. Just substitute the bean that you have. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit because I really do want to bring this up to a little bit of a simmer. All right, now I'm just going to hit it with a little fresh cracked pepper. You're not going to need, I'm just going to do a teeny pinch of salt. I'm not going to add much right now because I'm going to wait and taste it because the anchovies are going to bring a lot of saltiness to this. And the seafood stock, unless you're buying like a no salt added or a low sodium seafood stock, it's also going to add a little bit of saltiness. If you're making your own, then the sodium level would be a lot lower. So I'm not going to over salt it. I'm just going to let it go for now. And it's starting to come up. I think it's starting to come up to a little bit of a simmer. So let me just give this a little stir around. All right. And you can, and I don't know, if you want this to be a more of a richer kind of tomato-based stew, you could add a little bit more, like maybe even a larger can of the tomatoes or another can of tomatoes. I was thinking about doing it, but now that I'm stirring it, it's really kind of coming together, and it really is starting to have that deeper red color that I want. So I think I'll let it go. All right. So what you're going to do now on the recipe, but just because of time, on the recipe, once you get to this step, you're just going to let this kind of simmer for about 15 minutes before you add the shrimp to kind of let the flavors sort of come together. But now that I have this kind of up to a simmer, I'm going to go ahead and add the shrimp so that we can get them in there. So I have the shrimp defrosted, and that's the great thing about shrimp. You know, you can, if you forget to defrost it, it's okay. You can take it out of your freezer, put it in a colander like this, run some cold water over it, and it's going to defrost enough to just go ahead and add it. even if it's still a little bit frozen, that's okay. It will just take a little bit longer to cook, that's all. So I'm gonna add the shrimp. This is about 1 pound. That was a 2-pound bag, so I pulled out about half of that, and that's going in. And now I'm just gonna stir this around. And then basically we're really just cooking this at a simmer. You don't really want this necessarily at a high boil because the shrimp's gonna get a little tougher if it cooks too quickly. So you kind of want a low simmer, and because these shrimp are pretty cold, it really brought the temperature back down in the pan, so it's gonna take a little bit to probably come back up to a little bit of a simmer, so we'll see what happens. I'm gonna go ahead and put a lid, oh, actually, I'm gonna take that back. It's already going right back up. This is a pretty hot burner. All right, so we've got that going. I am gonna put the lid on it for now so that we can get it, so that we can see if I can get this cooked. Because once you put the shrimp in, depending on the size of the shrimp, these might take a little bit longer because they're a little bit bigger, but for the size that the recipe states, you probably have to cook for 10 minutes, maybe even less, 5 minutes. You know, it's not gonna take very long because once they go from that translucent kind of gray color to a nice pink, you're good. So you don't really wanna overcook them. So we'll keep an eye on those. Just remember a couple of nutritional points around this. So this is a great combination, obviously, of seafood, great protein source that we've talked about last week, as well as the beans, which is such a great combination. And in Tuscany, beans are in so many dishes. I mean, they are just in everything, which is fantastic because we all know beans are so incredibly healthy because of their fiber content and their nutrient content and their ability to add protein that's a plant-based protein to a meal. They're shelf stable, you can keep them in your pantry, they're relatively inexpensive. You can use canned, you can use dried and cook them from dried. The guideline really is for most of us to try to get at least 2 cups of beans in our diet every week. And I know for a lot of us that's probably not happening. But if you're using beans in stews, in soups, especially this time of the year when we're trying to cook things that are just a little bit more warming, you know, rather than maybe salads. But even with salads, you know, you can top your salads with any kind of a bean. You can add them in your burritos. You can add them in your scrambled eggs. Beans can really be added. You can top your toast with them. If you like them, that is just a really great addition to your regular eating pattern. So think about bringing them into your diet a little bit more frequently. All right, let's just take a peek because this is really, I got it probably a little higher than I should, which is okay because I kind of want to get this cooking through. So you can see out, and I'll pull it up to the camera, but the shrimp is definitely changing color. So we're getting, it's turning pink, you know, it's becoming a little more opaque in its color, and it's really only going to probably take a few more minutes. There's just a few, I'm just trying to get them kind of buried in the pool here, and so that they're cooking. And then to finish this off, let me just wipe off this cutting board. To finish this off, what we're going to do is we're going to take a lemon and your handy dandy zester. This is a microplane, which I love, and I use it all the time. So if you don't have one, it might be worth maybe, you know, putting on your holiday list as an idea. So what we're going to do is just take the full lemon and we're just going to zest it, right? So to zest a lemon, you're really just taking that outer, you know, yellow, really deep yellow, the peel, and not down to the white, because that, you know, you get to the white pith is a little bit more bitter. So we're just, oh, and it just smells so good when you're zesting. Oh, it just smells so good. All right, so about the whole lemon, we really want that zest. So you can see this is really boiling. You don't really want this. I'm doing it just to kind of get this done. But you really want to turn this down more to a simmer. But this shrimp is pretty well, it's a little bit longer, but it's pretty well there. So you're going to want yours to be at a simmer. But again, your shrimp will likely get done in 5 or 6 minutes. So we have the lemon zest. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. You want to add this when you turn off the heat, when everything's done. Then you'll add your lemon zest. And we're going to add the juice of the lemon as well. Not the whole lemon, and I guess it just depends. Let me just grab my knife. It just depends on the size of your lemon. About a tablespoon, which will probably be about half of your lemon, maybe not quite. So you can kind of eyeball it. You can measure it if you want to. A little bit more lemon juice is not going to matter. The main thing is you do kind of want to get the pits out because the pits are definitely the most bitter of the lemon. So I'm going to hold my hand over this to catch any pits, any seeds that might come out of the lemon as I'm squeezing it. And that way I just don't want those seeds to show up in there, because if they do get in there and they're cooking in there, they are going to add some bitterness, and we really don't want that. One thing that I always do is I usually take the lemon then, that's all that I finished using, cut it in half so that I can put it down my garbage disposal, because it just makes everything smell really good. All right, so that's going in. And then the other thing that the recipe calls for, it calls for adding fresh basil, which again is obviously something that you would find in a lot of Italian recipes. But I am kind of out of the basil season right now, and I've really sort of switched over pretty much to parsley. That's what I use most of the time now, and I just love it. So I have some fresh parsley that I just pulled some off. I'm just gonna kind of roll it together, and now we'll just slice it up. Just chiffonade it a little bit. You don't have to cut this up real fine. All right, and then we're gonna put that on top. If you have fresh basil, that's great. Go ahead and use it. Again, like I said, this time of the year. The other thing I thought of, and I'm not going to add it right now, but you could. I have some pesto from Costco that I usually almost always have in my refrigerator because I just love it for quick sauces and quick pasta dishes, eggs, whatever. This would be really good on top of this. So if you wanted to, and you have the pesto, you could top it with some pesto as well. I think that would taste really good, especially since if you don't have the fresh basil. All right, so I'm going to turn this off because I think we are there. All right, let me just hold this up to the camera so you can see it. All right, so here it is. So here's the Tuscan shrimp and bean stew. It's thick enough. I mean, if you want it thicker, you could probably thicken it with a little bit of tomato paste if you wanted to. I think it's perfectly fine the way it is. And I'll just take some out and I'll show you. And this again is using the butter beans rather than the cannellini beans, but either would be fine. All right, and then maybe just a little more parsley on top. All right, so here we have the Tuscan bean and shrimp stew, perfect for those cold winter nights that we're really experiencing right now here in the Northeast, right? And super easy, and it makes a fair amount. So this serves at least 6 to 8 people. This does freeze well too. So if you want to make it and you want to freeze it, you can defrost it and then have it, later on in the month or when things really, really get busy. So give that a try. One thing that's going to be coming up, and we'll be announcing it pretty soon, I am going to be doing a culinary nutrition course specifically for women, sort of 50 up and up. It's really to help kind of get us back into the kitchen, cooking fast and light and easy. We're going to be doing some really good winter recipes that again follow these sort of simpler guidelines, as well as helping you kind of get your kitchen maybe cleaned out and set up and ready to go for 2022. So we're going to be starting that course January the 18th. It's going to be once a week for 4 weeks. We'll be putting some information out about that if that's something that you might be interested in joining us. We are going to, have, I think, probably like a holiday special. So if you sign up, between a certain date, you'll get a really nice discount on that. But keep an eye out for that. We certainly will be posting it on Facebook as well as on Instagram, and we'll probably getting some emails out as well. All right, have a great day. Stay well, stay healthy, and bundle up. All right, thanks for joining. Bye-bye.